Hey everybody, I'm Shelley Spaeth, rhymes with faith. That's how I've learned to explain it. And I am a principal associate at Apt Associates. And we are a data-driven research and evaluation analytics firm, but I do health communication. So I'm one of less folks at my company who do communication. So I'm often challenged with internal and external messaging. But I am the developer and the coordinator of this great panel today, and I'm really, really excited with the folks that are here. And I'm gonna tell you a story of how we all came together, but we'll hold that for just a second. My pronouns are, how much fun are we having already? So my pronouns are she and her. I'm a white woman in her 40s, I'll admit it, late 40s, with brown hair, glasses. I'm wearing a black floral blouse and jacket. And for the next hour or so, we're gonna talk about the next generation of consumers of health information, especially how they access information, who they believe, and ultimately what we as communicators need to know to continue to successfully communicate with them as our audiences. So before we begin, I'm gonna do a really brief who is sitting in front of you, who is not here with us today, which is one of our first speakers, and that's Carrie James. Unfortunately, she will be joining us via video. She was gonna try to be on Zoom, but she has had a death in her family, so we are wishing her our thoughts, and she's very grateful. But she did take the time to do a video in her talk for us and send it, so we're excited to hear from her. She is actually the author of Behind Their Screens, have the book, What Teens Are Facing and Adults Are Missing. She's a senior research associate and principal investigator at Project Zero at Harvard. So her life's work is, she's a sociologist, and her life's work is around research around young people's digital, moral, and civic lives. That's a sentence. Over the past decade and plus, she has led research and educational initiatives focused on ethical issues in digital life, civic engagement, and participatory politics. She has two kids who also are on social media. Melissa, to my left, Pintor Carnegie, right? Okay, is the founder and lead educator at Sex Positive Families. She launched this nonprofit in 2017 as a for-profit. So sorry, it's a for-profit. That's important. Yes, and is a sexuality educator and licensed social worker who believes that all children deserve holistic, comprehensive, and shame-free sexuality education so they can live informed, empowered, and safer lives. She's the author of the best-selling self-published book, Sex Positive Talks to Have with Kids, a guide to raising sexually healthy, informed, empowered young people. And Merv, who's joining us down on the very far left of mine, Vice President, Education, Outreach, and Engagement at Common Sense Media. If you have kids, you probably know who I'm talking about. Or Common Sense Education, which is part of Common Sense Media. Merv is responsible for the overall outreach strategy and national partnerships, working directly to impact communities using technology for learning and life. He does a lot of work with schools, state-level organizations, community leaders, and national partners. And he's committed to fostering a whole community approach to digital well-being and establishing supportive learning spaces for children and families to thrive in the media and technology world. So as you can tell, this is a really cool group coming from a variety of places. And before we get started, I'm gonna tell you a quick story, a personal story, like I said, of how we came to be. I'm gonna acknowledge that this panel may be triggering for some. I think Michael mentioned this, but just so we know, we're talking from a parent perspective. We're talking about sexting, we're talking about nudes, we're talking about being online, mental health issues. So I'm just gonna acknowledge that now and totally understand if that's uncomfortable or if you need to step out. So personally, it was a night last September, and I remember it exactly. I remember where I was sitting when I got a phone call. Actually, I got repeated phone calls around 8 p.m. I was at my desk at home, one child, 16, upstairs, one 12, downstairs, or vice versa, but they were there. Both kids were home. I have two girls. And raising girls in this world is not easy right now. And so a weird number kept popping up on my phone, and I ignored it because, we don't answer callers anymore if we don't know who they are. And after a few different rings, I picked it up, and I heard a voice say, Miss Spoeth, because, they didn't know who I was, so of course it's spelled, they said it wrong. This is a detective from the police department, and I'm calling about your daughter. So if both my kids weren't home, I probably would have fallen down, but they were, and so I knew they were okay, which is the first thing that goes through any parent's mind. It's every one of our nightmares that we're going to end up in that situation where you're having a police officer call about your children. We were fine, but my mind raced. I didn't know what to do. You just panic. And so anyway, what happened next is a long, much more complicated story. It's sensitive, it's upsetting. It's a story that isn't mine to tell. So not to keep you in the dark, but it was my daughter's story to tell. And what you need to know is that it was related to social media. There were it was a web of legal and illegal activity that happened among a group of teenagers. And you've probably heard these stories over and over and over again online, in your networks, and it happens to a lot of us. So as a parent who is a health communicator and person who just can't believe that I've had this many conversations with my child and we're still sitting in this position, I went immediately to what I thought I should do, and I, the next day, heard about this book. And I couldn't believe it, because this book is filled, Carrie's book, with interviews and information straight from the kids' mouths about media, about what we're missing. Because I clearly talked to her about this. I talked to her about everything that happened, and we disconnected. There was some way we did not hear each other. And so I got the book, I read it. There's such great information in it. And so as we started thinking about this summit this year, my worlds kind of collided. And I just thought, we have this group of teenagers that's coming up, and I'm a communicator, and I don't know how to talk to them about social media, so how am I gonna communicate with them on social media? At the same time, my best friend sent me information from Melissa. She has this great podcast. No, it's not a podcast, but it's a many forms of media, but it was a webinar. And I forced my whole family. I had eye rolls about puberty, and we sat together and we listened to her webinar and did the activities, and it gave us a language to talk about things that are really hard to talk about, including things like sexting and nudes and all the things that you don't want to say. And so that's where Melissa and I got connected, and so she felt like a great person to be here today. And then Merv is, he's Common Sense Media, which is, if my kids were ever allowed to, when they were younger, see a movie when it came out, it was through Common Sense Media. And I knew where to say, like, there's gonna be this scene, and we're not gonna watch it, or we are gonna watch this scene, but we need to talk about it. So this is kind of how this panel came to be, and why I'm excited, because it's personal, yet at the same time I feel like, and I'm hoping, we all take away something that helps us be better communicators in the future with this group of kids who, I realize my child, who's 16, is about to be out there and deciphering this world of communication and information on her own without me. So that's the story. I'm going to read something really quickly to set up Carrie, who's going to talk to us for a second. But one of the things I loved about this book, and she says this in the very beginning, is that the key to our approach was first collecting and centering data from diverse youth, and then co-interpreting the data with young people. Working with teens throughout our research process provided additional checks and balances as we continued to consider what might we be misunderstanding or missing altogether. We also repeatedly asked teens, what do you most wish adults understood? And that's where I felt like I was misunderstood. So the hope is that we will overcome that hurdle. So we're gonna go ahead and turn on Carrie, and we'll hear from her, and then we'll come back and go from there.
Hi all, I hope the conference is going well. I'm sad that I can't join your discussions live, but I feel really grateful that I'm able to share insights from my work in the form of this short video. My name is Carrie James. I am a researcher at Project Zero at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and Emily Weinstein is my key partner in so much of my work. I'm a sociologist by training, and Emily is a developmental psychologist. What that means is that we bring both individual level micro lenses as well as big picture lenses to the work that we do, which is focused on teens and tech. For the last decade plus, Emily and I have been chasing a timely set of questions about teens and screens. We've been asking, what is it like for teens to grow up in a world with radical 24/7 connectivity? More recently, we've had a particular interest in what's hard for adolescents about growing up with social media specifically, and why. What are their specific pain points? And crucially, how can adults better understand and support young people around what's hard? In this brief talk, I'm going to share just a few headline insights on two topics that are related to these questions. But I want to give a little context first and actually start with a work of art. So I'm going to start here with this painting, which is an optical illusion. At first, you might recognize Vincent van Gogh from his famous self-portrait. But if you shift your perspective, you can also see that his ear is the pink hat of a girl in a long blue dress. And his nose is a seated man, maybe a farmer, looking across the landscape. His eyes are houses in the horizon, and his eyebrows are actually their roofs. So what does this have to do with teens and technology? We all have our own assumptions about social media, but our goal in the work that we're doing and in writing the book Behind Their Screens was to help adults shift their perspectives a bit, to change what you see, so to speak, about the topic of teens and screens. In short, there's more than meets the eye at first glance. Several years ago, Emily and I had the opportunity to work on an amazing study. We were collaborating with our colleagues at Common Sense Education. I know that Merv is on the panel there from Common Sense. So we were collaborating with Merv and others on some lesson updates for their digital citizenship curriculum. We started surveying students and educators about different tech issues and questions, initially as a way to make sure we were designing resources that were the most relevant and needed by both youth and their teachers. We ended up with tremendous interest and a data set of more than 3,500 responses from young people, middle and high schoolers. And we had one question in particular that really stopped us in our tracks when we started to review the data. The question was, what worries you most about today's digital world? We had thousands of responses to this question from the mouths of babes. And frankly, even a decade into doing research on this topic, what we were hearing surprised us. We realized that we actually needed help analyzing the data. So we partnered with teens. We recruited a teen advisory council of 22 teens who came from different communities, contexts, and identities across the US. Again and again, Emily and I kept asking them, what are adults missing that you most need us to understand? This proved to be such a generative question, and I highly recommend you routinely ask it to the teens in your life. Behind Their Screens covers a set of topics that our research and our partnership with teens helped us see in a new light. These are topics that they wish we understood better. So I'm going to give you a teen level view of just two specific topics. The first topic I want to give voice to is friendship dilemmas. We know from teens that there are tremendous relational upsides to technology, but we also heard that there are significant pressures. We heard repeatedly that being a good friend is super complicated in a 24/7 connected world. This manifests in a couple of different ways. For one, teens can feel a pressure to be always available. A 17-year-old told us, I feel like if you're not connected, then the friendship will fall apart. And a 13-year-old shared, if you don't text your friends for a while, then they come up with the dumbest excuse to cut you off. So there's this keen sense that disconnecting could actually mean losing friends. Now, this might sound dramatic to our adult ears, but remember how vital friendships feel during those teen years. The feelings also go the other way too. Staying connected is an essential part of being there for others. So a 17-year-old told us, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings if I can't stay in touch with them. And a 14-year-old told us, my biggest worry is that I don't have enough contact with friends who are struggling because I don't want my friends to do something bad just because I didn't respond in time to stop them from harming themselves or worse. This is one of the quotes that stopped us in our tracks. Current trends in adolescent mental health are truly alarming. A hidden toll to this, a hidden side to it, is how hard it can be for the friends of teens in distress. So even if a teen is not personally struggling right now, they are more likely than ever to have someone in their network, perhaps even a very close friend who is. And receiving messages at all hours or posts that signal distress can be a heavy burden on young shoulders. Even commenting on a friend's latest Instagram post can create pressures and puzzles. We hear from girls especially that the sense of obligation to comment on friends' new Instagram posts and right away is huge. So this text thread here illustrates this dynamic. One of our teen advisors, Michelle, told us in a nutshell that she will tap on a friend's Instagram post and almost immediately get a text message saying, you didn't comment, you need to comment right away. For Michelle, this really captures friendship dilemmas that are at their heart about authenticity. When so much of posting feels obligatory, being authentic can feel nearly impossible. Teens also tell us about a felt need to respond ASAP to inbound texts, Snapchat messages, and other direct messages. The dynamics of being left unread, essentially being left hanging, can trigger feelings of vulnerability and even mind reading. Our friendship is over. They didn't respond to my text. To say, in today's connected world, there are so many kinds of social information for teens to obsess and stress over. And adolescents are developmentally primed to care deeply about this kind of social information. The other topic I want to speak to is sexting. And this is a topic that likely generates more than a little anxiety. It definitely does for me as the mom of 2 teen girls. But in our research, we learned so many interesting and frankly, really important things from listening to teens' perspectives on this topic. Adults tend to use just one word, sexting, to describe a broad range of behaviors that most of us would prefer teens avoid altogether. But data from teens reveal really important distinctions. Sexting can be consensual and wanted by both parties. Sex can also be pressured or actively coerced, the result of one person feeling uncertain about how to deal with the requests from another, or even feeling trapped by threats or blackmail. And then finally, sex can also be shared without permission, as in the case of pictures that are sent to one person in trust, but then they're shared with a broader audience without consent. So why do these distinctions matter? A leading reason is because they tee up different interventions. Effective interventions are definitely going to be different for consensual and wanted sexting as opposed to pressured sexting and nudes shared without permission. What's more, if adults really want to understand or intervene in ways that shift adolescents' behaviors, we need to understand the calculus, the thinking behind their decision-making, including the feelings and the social influences at play. When teens send nudes and we say, what were they thinking? We often assume that they weren't thinking at all, except about their intimacy with another person, or that they just don't appreciate the risks. But we actually heard otherwise from teens. And behind their screens, we share a list of 9 reasons why teens sext even when they know the risks. Here are just a few of those reasons. They're in a relationship and they want to deepen intimacy or show trust. They can't figure out how to say no. Sending a picture actually feels easier than dodging the request. The asker is persistent and wears them down. They fear consequences if they refuse. If we want to make sense of why teens prioritize these kinds of considerations, tuning into developmental forces and how those forces are shaping their decision-making is really important. The fact that adolescents are so very primed to care about their peer relationships is key. But we also hear from teens about how this can play out in uniquely, distinctly gendered ways. So boys may not want to be sexting, but they can feel a sense of pressure, explicit pressure or implicit pressure from their friends to collect nudes, and once collected, even share them with others. For girls, if they're considering saying no to a request for a nude, they're often weighing their ability to say no, those refusal skills, alongside real or imagined fears about what it will mean for them to say no. Often short-term outcomes are front of mind and seem guaranteed. These include outcomes that teens want to ensure, like attracting someone they have a crush on, or outcomes they want to avoid near term, like being called a prude. For all teens, regardless of their gender identities, longer term potential consequences certainly loom. They're aware of risks, but those risks are often ambiguous and uncertain. And the ways the adolescent brain is developing actually skew their focus towards the more immediate rewards, like peer validation over those long-term, really ambiguous outcomes. So on a high level, what's really clear is that this is a complicated landscape. Adults often say, just don't sext, and that's the beginning and end of the conversation. Teens told us that we need to do more and we need to do better. This is one idea that really stuck with us as an important pivot in approach for both digital citizenship education and for digital parenting. So this quote came from an educator we interviewed who said, I'm not interested in giving my students a definition of sexting, in just giving them a definition of sexting, because that's not going to help them make a decision at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. A lot of tricky decision points happen when adults aren't around. And so we need to think about how to open lines of communication so they'll come to us when they need us. But we also need to accept that they're often not going to come to us at all. So we need to help them develop the skills and dispositions to slow down, to make thoughtful digital decisions at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night and really any other time. So that's the spirit of a lot of the digital parenting advice, the digital citizenship education tools and resources that we build. So I want to wrap up my talk by sharing a couple of more specific keys, ways to embody the spirit of this quote. I want to leave you with a couple of specific suggestions. So first, asking over assuming. News headlines and our own well-intentioned worries for our kids can contribute to so many assumptions about teens and technology. Sometimes those assumptions are on point, but sometimes they're way off. And regardless, teens really vary. They're not just having one monolithic experience. So there's power in sitting down with our individual teens and asking over making assumptions. What is it like for you to have all this tech? What's hard for you? What do you love? What's really difficult? What do you really need help about? And when we ask these questions, we really want to lean into non-judgmental curiosity. Or as I often say to educators, we really want to practice a pedagogy of listening. When teens do open up to us, empathy over eye rolling is key. It's understandable to want to roll our eyes at some of the behaviors we observe. Believe me, I've been there. But leading with empathy is so important. And then, the key thing is we might not get exactly how Snapchat or TikTok work, but the developmental needs to be liked, to have friends, to be a good friend are age old. And adults can make a huge difference by tapping into empathy and validating what's hard. Saying things like, that sounds really upsetting, or I can see why that would hurt your feelings. It sounds really simple, but it can be really meaningful. And then finally, at the end of the day, our aim should be to build young people's very sense of agency. This is really important because in so many areas of digital life, we heard from teens a struggle to feel and be in control. When they care about a struggling friend, but they also want to disconnect for their own self-care. When someone asks them for a nude and they feel like every decision, including saying no, is a lose-lose. So how can we do this? How can we support young people's sense of agency? Number one is we can help teens build concrete skills and develop strategies they can deploy in stressful digital situations. For example, we can help them develop skills to set boundaries. A big puzzle pain point for teens is what can you do or say if someone's texting is becoming burdensome, or if they're expecting you to be available around the clock? And how can you say it in a way that's both effective and compassionate? So we can actually help teens brainstorm language for setting boundaries that they want and really need. And we can also help teens, especially our younger teens and tweens, come up with language for navigating those pressured sexting situations I was mentioning a few moments ago. Overall, equipping teens with practical skills and strategies supporting their very sense of agency is essential because we know that feelings of agency connect to young people's very sense of well-being. So this brings me to the end of my talk. I'll close out by returning to this painting that I began with. And I started with the provocation that, as with an optical illusion, there is more than at first meets the eye when it comes to teens and technology. I hope some of those insights that I shared have helped you see more than previously met your eye. Thank you so much, and feel free to be in touch.
Thank you. So we are going to do one more quick video. We put a call out to teens from folks we knew, just asking them to tell us a little more about what they think and what they get their health, where they get their health information from. So Carrie talked a lot about where in general information comes from, but we're going to hear a few teens, and then I'm going to hand it right over to you, Melissa, to go into the next moments. Okay.
Hi, my name is Tyson Carnegie, and I'm 13 years old from Austin, Texas. I really like YouTube because I find a lot of great things on there, and I use it pretty frequently. There's a lot of really good creators out there that give me useful information. Probably about every day. Yeah, primarily through YouTube and Google, because when someone says something about a body part or a condition or something, I don't know what it is, I'll use YouTube or Google to find out what that means or what it is. I follow Dr. Mike on YouTube, and I follow Sex Positive Families on TikTok.
My favorite social media app is TikTok because that's the one where I can get the most authentic recommendations for movies, books, and TV shows. If I need specific health information, to me, I will just Google it. And then other than my mom, Monica Ponder, I don't follow any other healthcare professionals, but occasionally they will still pop up on my For You page.
My favorite social media platform is TikTok, and I spend just about every day, every hour on TikTok. I find most of my healthcare stuff on TikTok and Instagram from my recommended videos, from videos that I've liked before, and I currently do not follow any healthcare professionals.
Hello? Okay. All right. Whew, that was a lot, y'all. Carrie, that book is amazing. Thank y'all for sharing a copy in lieu of this event. Highly recommend it if you haven't checked it out already. My name is Melissa Pintor Carnegie. My pronouns are she or they. I'm a non-binary person. I'm most affirmed as a person versus feminine, masculine, binary. I have brown hair with loose curls that I worked hard on that probably in the humidity or who knows what's happening. And wearing a black cardigan and a brown, tan, black dress. And I'm 5'5.5", don't forget the half, but I'm sitting. So I am the founder of Sex Positive Families. I'm a social worker here in Austin, Texas, native to Tonkawa land. And I'm a sexuality educator. I'm also a parent to 3 amazing young people. One of them you just saw, Tyson, who is 13. He's not my oldest. My oldest is 24. She's actually just graduated and passed her NCLEX, so she is a nurse now in labor and delivery. Her second bachelor's degree, she's 24. And then I have a bonus son who's 9 years old. So I'm definitely entrenched and have been so since I was 17. I was a young parent, so I know the parenting journey quite well, and it deeply informs the work that I do with Sex Positive Families. I wanted to start by asking a question for those who feel safe and comfortable to engage. 3 curiosities that I have. First one, show of hands. Growing up, how many of you you were in a home where conversations about bodies or sex felt positive, comfortable, shame-free? Okay, I'm seeing 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and some hands are a little lower than others, so that's cool too. I won't necessarily assume what that means. So maybe, I don't know, what's that, like 10% or less? Yeah, okay. And well, I'll hold that thought. The second, thank y'all. How many of you, and I have to put my hand down because I did not. How many of you had sex education in school that you could consider inclusive, comprehensive, not fear-based? Okay, lots of heads shaking no. There's like one hand up, 2 hand, 3. Did I see? 3, yeah, and lots of no's, lots of sad faces. Oh, maybe we're remembering, okay. Yeah, listen, it might have been a while ago. I get it. Okay, much less than 10% there, right? And then finally, how many of you identify as parents, caregivers, or mentors to young people? Okay, yeah. Okay, that's almost the whole room, so opposite end there. Thank y'all for participating in that. So what does this tell us? First of all, this is super common. So we do a lot of our work with sex-positive families using social media channels, online platforms. When I first started the work 6 years ago, I knew that it could be hard to get busy parents and caregivers to come to workshop physical spaces, but they're scrolling. They're online. And when we're talking about topics that are taboo, highly stigmatized by society, it could feel safer to consume information and content about these topics in the comfort of your own space without other people necessarily knowing, and with all the logistics of parenting. And so I've asked these questions on our platform. We have over 300,000 followers on Instagram, over 90,000 over on Facebook. The algorithm is not nice to us because sex. And so, the percentages pretty much mirrored what you all showed here in terms of how the answers played out. And so what that tells us is that many grown-ups today did not grow up in homes where conversations about these very human things were safe, were affirmed, were comfortable, were welcome. And we are finding ourselves as adults now in the position of mentoring and raising a next generation of young people. But we're doing that without the knowledge, without the life skills, without the lived experience of seeing what it could look like if you get to have those conversations and you get to create that kind of connection and provide that kind of education. So what does that then do? That fosters an adult population who can feel really nervous, unsure, anxious around these conversations. And we are now, thankfully, moving the needle. It's not the birds and the bees, like the generation before us using those euphemisms. Okay, now we're moving the needle, and we've been a part of that change too through social media, saying, let's call it what it is. It's humans, it's sex. Let's talk about it. Let's make sure our young people feel prepared and not scared, and they feel supported along that path. So that's very much what I do with sex-positive families. And, excuse me, let me breathe. Okay. You can breathe with me, too. And the work is highly influenced by my own journey of, like many of you, not growing up with this support, with these resources, and then finding myself, for me, at the age of 17, being a parent. I'm 42 now, so it's my entire adult life that I've been a parent, and wanting to do better so that my young people could have support, they could potentially have better outcomes, more informed, be less likely to experience harm or trauma around bodies and sex, or to cause harm or trauma. So that's what inspires the work. And what is the work? So with sex-positive families, like I shared, we have our social media platforms. That is where we do a lot of our education. We're catching people while they're, living and while they're liking, other things. We get to be in there, giving them tips and tricks and helping them find the teachable moments and the language around these very human things so that they can put it into practice, because that's really what it's all about, is us being able to move past our own discomfort and develop the habits and the knowledge that helps us to show up in these ways. So social media is one way. We have our website, which we have a browsable database of hundreds of vetted resources by topic, by age, and by type of resource that a person can search at any time on the umbrella of sexual health topics. And we keep that up to date, inclusive resources. And then we do our education. And so, just like Shelley shared, I started by teaching just parents and caring adults. And I taught virtually primarily, but also in-person talks and in-person workshops. This was before the pandemic. And I put a call out initially asking about topics, specific topics that caregivers, parents, followers felt most challenged by. And by far, porn talks, conversations about porn, sexualized media, online safety, overwhelmingly. And it continues to overwhelmingly, because this is the pain point, caregivers feeling overwhelmed with the access that young people have today. And, young people are now being given devices when they're babies. They know to swipe. They have, the babies are swiping. And, or you can take a picture and they want to see what it looks like, right? And they're like a toddler. So they are being handed technology before the conversations about how to properly use it. So, and technology can be used to soothe, and is handed to young people so they can be quiet or just be engaged. And so we might find ourselves not having some critical conversations or scaffolding or building those conversations over time. And then they're a teenager, or they're a tween, right? Or they're an elementary student, and they're facing a lot of these situations that we wish they weren't, and that sometimes we think, not my child. Or even if you aren't giving the device to your child, if they're leaving the home and going to a school, if they're riding a bus, to school, whether they are or aren't, if they have older siblings, or if they have older family members, if they play with neighbors, who are older, you pretty much, all of our young people pretty much fall in those categories. And so we have to be talking about these topics. Through our education, we started with the parent workshops. That porn literacy workshop webinar that I did, 480 registrants. And that happened within 4 days of posting that. And the webinar was a month from that date. I had to call Zoom and ask for the webinar package so I could have more than 100 people. So it's a big pain point. But one of our mottos is prepared, not scared. Helping parents feel prepared for these conversations so that they can build that connection, so that their young people can see them as a safe space to be curious, to ask questions, and to get support, and it not come from a fear or shame-based place. You mentioned the book. I wrote a book, Sex Positive Talks I Have with Kids. And then March 2020, literally when the lockdowns happened for so many of us, we launched our Growing Into You virtual puberty workshops. And it started as an in-person workshop. A year before that, one of our followers who was local to this Austin area reached out and said, hey, could you do like a puberty workshop? And I was like, sure, but 2 caveats. One, it has to be family style. We're not just gonna teach the young people, and we're not just gonna teach the grown-ups. It felt important. I taught sex ed across 3 different charter schools here in Austin for 2.5 years. So coming with that experience of teaching, full sex ed curricula, I know that parent involvement is really key. And then the second thing is that we're not just going to teach about the inaccurate binary of girl puberty and boy puberty. We're going to teach young people about the many changes that bodies experience in the tween and teen years. And they were like, that sounds cool, great. So we did 2 sessions. Tyson, who was a 4th grader at that time, he's now going into 8th grade, he actually co-facilitated the 2nd session, and it was for Girl Scout troops on one, and then they asked us to come back to get their Boy Scout troops. So March 2020 happened, and then that is when we took things virtual because we knew families were at home. Ever since March 2020, every single month, our sessions sell out. We're able to reach families literally from around the world because of the beautiful space of virtual. So using technology in a positive way to connect families on these concepts. And it's interactive, it's fun, it's engaging. We use videos also by Amaze. Anybody heard of Amaze or used Amaze? Oh, check them out. Aren't they amazing? Yes. Amaze.org and also amaze.org/junior. They have amazing resources for young people, engaging, short, animated, fun videos on a wealth of sexual health topics. And they support parents, they support educators with their programming. So definitely check them out. So we've been doing those workshops. We created a self-paced course in 2021. My oldest daughter, helped me to create that. And we have served over 3,500 families with the live version and over 500 families with the self-paced version. So that you asked about tips. I want to just share a couple things. Am I doing okay? 1 more minute? Okay. All right. So on tips, she asked about tips that we would share. So a couple of things that we say very regularly anytime we're working with parents or doing our parent-centered education is young people are not looking for us to be encyclopedias. And many of you may know what an encyclopedia is. I said it in our last puberty workshop on Sunday, and then anonymous question, what's an encyclopedia? And I was like, So that was a fun moment. Right. And then hashtag Google for old people. Yeah. So young people are not looking for us to be encyclopedias. They're looking for us to be available when they need us. And so don't take on the pressure to have to know it all, to have to be a sex educator and know all the facts. It's important to just be available. Know the reliable spaces and resources to turn to and help your young person in an age-congruent way understand how to access and use the resources, use technology. We use Common Sense Media all the time in our home. As soon as it was like Spider-Man movie coming, okay, great, let me go see what the reviews say, some great conversation starter questions. So there are so many resources nowadays. Make your home a safe space where questions can be asked, where no topic is taboo. This is how we create a powerful next generation who feels supported along their path. Thank you.
I know, right? I have to follow Carrie, I have to follow her. So my name is Merv Lapus. Introduction earlier. I'm a Filipino male, pushing 6 foot. I'm gonna own that. The hair makes it 6 foot. So still rocking 2010s faux hawk proudly. Navy blue blazer, black shirt, flossing some white trim, and happy to be here. So the work that I do with Common Sense, my whole role is really focused on how I work with school districts and school communities to really bring really important conversations around media and technology to kids, educators, and their families. We really look at a whole community approach because, as was shared earlier, some of the most trusted individuals that we'll get our information from are going to be our community members. So my goal is how do we empower youth, kids, and families to really think critically, participate responsibly, and behave safely with media and technology because it's not going anywhere, right? And so a lot of the work that Carrie and a lot of her and Emily have done around this research, we've looked at, okay, what are the pedagogical implications around some of this research? How do we actually build this in to a learning experience where, one, kids aren't going to scoff at it and be like, oh my gosh, here we go again, right? But they're actually going to be like, oh, they're meeting me where I'm at. I get it. How are we going to build up educators to recognize that, you know what? I'm a math teacher. They're coming in with drama. I can't even get to the curriculum or the resources because I can't even get past the side chatter, right? Or the texting that's happening underneath, right? Or even just the call outs that are happening in class that are like pulling out some vernacular you've never heard of that's actually then demonizing like 3/4 of your class and now it's affected. So what do you even do? It's like, oh, we're just trying to talk about Pythagorean theorems, right? So how do we empower every educator to just feel more comfortable in understanding the language, recognizing the issues, and actually become a trusted individual? They don't need to know it all. They just need to know how to be able to address some realities and then be able to bring them to trusted individuals who could leverage all the free resources we have for educators to teach these things in classrooms. But the reality is, much like Carrie shared, our goal is not just that we see our lessons taught in every classroom, because that's not a reality. It's not, you have A to Z like needs, you got math, you got all the things, you've got just testing, and educators are already, one, underpaid, two, don't have the time to teach anything more than just their curriculum, but three, are dealing with the social, emotional issues that kids are coming in with, the social media issues, and even their own issues of their own community that are then, compounded on top of just the drama, right? So as I think about that, and as I think about how are we going to do this work, our big goal was then really partner with those individuals. So work with school districts, work with educators, and the reality is, so working with an administrator, you can get a lot done because they can do the top-down approach. But if you're an educator, if you're an administrator telling you, here's what you need to do, oh, here they go again. Here comes Mr. Lapus telling us what we need to do. Oh, I've already got so much to do. I don't need to hear this. And it's like, you know what? Shut my door. I'm going to do things my own way, even if it's really good. The reality is these conversations are supplemental. And there's, as of probably 2020, wasn't a lot of funding for supplemental resources or professional development. And when it comes to these conversations, parents went to their teachers. They went to their schools. What do I do about this? It followed them home, right? Where do we get the training? Where do we get the funding? There's a lot of funding now actually funneling in for media literacy, news and media literacy, digital citizenship. There's many different forms it's taking, right? So it's important to know how it's being funded in and really think about how do we then provide professional development around this. There's a lot of resources that are out there. Oftentimes, a lot of the resources are pretty didactic and fear-based. It is, sexing's bad, stay away. And it's coming from a good place, because the reality is they're coming from the reality of we've seen what happens when it happens, and we just don't want it to happen any further. But when kids hear that, it's you're not speaking my language, right? Which is why the important work that we've been doing with Project Zero around why are they doing these things, what are the decisions they're making, and getting them in a conversation have been incredibly important. What does that look like? We're going to do that today. I'm going to test y'all. What is a simile? Does anyone remember what a simile is? Anyone want to give me a loose definition? I got a hand. You just gave me the full definition, like straight up definition. All right, comparing two things using like or as. I want you all to think about your media lives. What does your life look like with media? Okay, so your simile is my media life is like what? So I'll give you an example. My media life is like a dripping faucet. Even though I turn it off, it keeps coming down. Something keeps dripping out, right? So I want you to take a moment, take 30 seconds. What is your media life like to you? Memorize it, write it down. Then I'm going to give you 30 seconds to share with people next to you. My media life is like what? Feel free to start sharing if you have it already.
Murph, fireworks.
Fireworks. Like that? All right. All right, if you can hear my voice, clap once. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. If you can hear my voice, clap 3 times. These are teaching strategies, right? It's pedagogical, right? These are what we do. This is what we try to do so that we can make it approachable, right? How many of you guys, gals, how many of y'all could have kept going in this conversation? Yeah. We've created curriculum that is based on building these ideas of these digital dilemmas. The reality is that we don't want to just talk about like cyberbullying or the drama that's online. The reality is when you see situations like this, you're bringing in your whole self, and to tell you this is what's wrong, this is what's right, don't do this, stay away from here, is actually may not connect with you. We have these dispositions. We have our morals, our ethics, our backgrounds, our communities, our friends, our family that inform potentially the decisions we make. And if our only community are the people that we follow, that could be problematic, especially when we know that sometimes when we follow certain personalities, you get recommended affirming personalities, and you get stuck in echo chambers. You get stuck in information that starts to just flow that will either affirm, rarely does it go against. That's something you have to actively do. So when we work with these educators and when we work with these school districts, we need to be able to create curriculum and resources that kids are going to feel like, oh, okay, we're helping to form the new norms in this classroom. Having this rich discussion, let's set our expectations. As an educator, it's not that you have to really go deep and set them for them. They'll set it themselves. But now you've built their agency and you can hold them accountable to it when drama does come up. Remember when we started this back in August? Here are the 10 things we said we were going to do. Let's do them now. Okay, good, we good? All right, now, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. How do we get to that, right? And then you can get back to your instruction. So, but it's all sounds really easy. The reality is we try to make everything as turnkey as possible so you can take it, and even as simple as 15-minute discussions. Like, we created these dilemmas that are about sexting, that are about harassment, that are about just social pressures of, you sent a text message, I'm out here right now giving a talk, I've got 6 messages from my wife, and I feel so much anxiety right now. Like, I feel like I need to respond, right? And our kids, they have that same anxiety with their own friends. I'm like, and then you see the 3 dots, I'm like, what are they gonna say? You're already increasing your anxiety of like trying to just tell the future of what you think is gonna happen or what you think is already happening. And so allowing for us to also teach our kids how these things are built so that they can break it down themselves, right? Algorithms are there. How do you work against them? How do you break the algorithm? It's hard to. Oftentimes, these companies don't even know the limits of their algorithms already, right? So what can you do? How do you go against it? One of the things we talk about in news and media literacy, since we talked about that earlier in the previous panels, is something called lateral research. And how do you find value in lateral research? It's not something that you're being told you have to do. I really find it valuable that when they give me something, I'm going to prove it wrong. All right, where can I find an opposing, perspective? Who is this author? What do I know about this author? Do I even trust them? It's not about being cynical. It's about being critical. And if we can build that as a skill and provide these opportunities to pause and think and reflect and understand, oh yeah, like I can own my position because I vetted against it or for it, and I did that work, and we build that in the practice of education, that is building the future. So for us, if we want to really reach communities and we really want to try and get out there, I don't have the capacity. We're a nonprofit. I got a team of 7 around the country, and we do our best to work with school districts and counties and ISDs. Our goal is, how can we help you align these things to things that are already adopted, that are becoming adopted, or that are part of your instruction, so that it's not one more thing. Because it can't feel like one more thing for your educators, because the immediate reaction is going to be like, I don't have time for that, right? But at the same time, how do we build something where an educator can see themselves in this lesson or in this instruction and feel like, I have that same question. I'm wondering how to go through that. And the purpose of the lesson is not about me giving you answers. It's about us facilitating a guided conversation in a trusted space with setting these norms of conversation and understanding, and then coming up with the solutions ourselves and moving forward. And it goes from things like media balance, understanding what does media mean to you, to understanding what digital footprints mean, and that when you do something online, it sets a footprint in the sand. Everything you put in is going to be ChatGPT 5 or 6. Like if you guys, I know you heard you guys talked about AI earlier. We're all feeding it every time we put anything in there, so just know that. It's a good or a bad, right? It's on how you use it. All the way to things like understanding relationships, understanding hate speech, mean speech and the difference or the like, and then news and media literacy and understanding the implications of that. So my biggest things that I've learned in this work, we want to try to do it all, right? We want to be able to work with every single school district. Unfortunately, there's a lot of policies that are making that very hard. We're looking at things like social emotional learning as being something that's being conflated with other things. We're looking at mental health being conflated as other things, when we're just really trying to be there for our kids and their realities. So we have to do the hard work of even looking at the policies and seeing where do we help align with the policies that are in place, because at the root of them, a lot of it do come down to, we just want our kids to be safe and healthier. But there's just a lot of rhetoric and unfortunately a lot of other things that start to conflate these issues. And so as much as we want to go really focus on the learning needs of kids and looking at some of the ties through the work and the research we've done with Project Zero, we also have to look at the policies we pass and the policies that we can influence with the policymakers that we're connected to. So Common Sense as an organization, we are a nonprofit. We do three main things. We rate, educate, and advocate. For a lot of you who might be parents or caregivers, you've come to see our ratings and reviews around media and technology, around media especially. On the education side is everything I've been talking about, but we do a lot of work on the policy side around Common Sense Kids Action. And the whole focus there is kid partisan. Are these bills good for kids? Developmentally and in the future, we do know that Gen Z is the most actively participatory voting group in the country, and it's only going to increase with Generation A because of the access to the resources and the tools that they use. Dang, that got real deep real quick. So what are you all going to do?
Yeah.
What are you all
And
going to do to
purple.
empower them forward? Because the reality is they are a very active bloc. Whether they are actively out there and sharing their perspective and being activists, or they're being slacktivists. But they're showing you, this is what I believe in, I'm just doing it through online portals, right? They're vocal. They want to be able to share information out there. They trust their information most from their family and their community, right? But where's their family and community getting their information? We need to trust that our kids can age them up, scale up our own family, scale up our own kids, our own parents. And parents, it can be a hard thing for parents to soak that in, but kids love knowing that they know more than their parents. So how do you shape that conversation and know that I'm approachable? If you come to me with a question, you're never going to get in trouble. If I find out you lied or tried to hide something, we got problems. But you'll never have a problem coming to me and telling me, I heard something, I don't know what to do with this. Well, let's talk about it, right? Changing that disposition as a parent is gonna bring you into someone as a trusted person, not just a parent, a trusted person when I don't know what's happening. But we need to facilitate that as a community. We always say it takes a village or it takes a community. Well, if we all feel uncomfortable talking about these things, then we don't know where to go. So, my goal, get into every school. Right now, we're in about 75% of schools in the country has an educator registered using Common Sense, and that's great. It's about 1.1 million educators using our resources. That's still a fraction. It sounds like a lot, but it's still a drop in the reality of all of our kids and being able to reach all communities. So that's my goal. That's my charge forward,
Thank
and
you.
happy to talk more about the work.
Yeah, thank you so much, Merv. And we're at time. We totally put a lot into this 1 hour. So what I was going to recommend is we'll stay up here for a few minutes since this is break time. If you want to have individual conversations, or we can meet out there, and then we can share contact information. I'm offering it, but I'll find out if that's okay for specific questions. And I think the big takeaway is I have hope. I hope you guys have hope. I think we need to listen. We need to advocate. We need to be there. We need to listen. We need to engage. I think that we learned some great things today, and there's some bright spots. So thank you.